Let's now get the thoughts of Nomura Chief Asian Economist Euben Paracuelles, joining us now live from Singapore. Euben, thank you so much for joining us. Are you concerned with this high inflation rate of 8.7%? You're on mute, Euben. Euben, you're on mute.
Hi, Rico.
Yeah.
Yes.
Are
hi,
you
Rico.
concerned?
Thanks for having me. Sorry about that. Yeah, it is a concern. We thought by January, inflation would have already started to come down, as we have seen in many parts of the region. But the Philippines surprised massively to the upside with a big pickup. And I think what's interesting is really how broad-based the sources of the pickup was. So it's not just about onions or food inflation, but we've seen electricity rates persistently increasing, and then the more discretionary type of items, things like restaurants, spending on personal items, et cetera, et cetera. So the momentum has picked up speed, and unless this gets abated, we're probably going to see another month or two of more than 8% inflation for the country.
When you say more than 8%, over the next 1 to 2 months, could it even go over 9% in February and in March?
I think that would be obviously conditional on what's happening on domestic supply. And within that, I would say supply management among the authorities, I think, has to step up. Importation needs to be a bit more proactive and well-planned. And at the same time, these measures have to be accompanied by close monitoring and, trying to ensure that malpractices or hoarding behavior is not going to exacerbate domestic supply shortages. This is something that we've seen Indonesia do very effectively. And as a result, food inflation there has been relatively stable. It's come up a little bit, but again, nowhere near what we're seeing in the Philippines. So, yeah, I think the only way to prevent this is really better supply management. That's the only recourse that I think the authorities will have.
All right, better supply management. That means more imports of basic commodities. The economic team, Euben, led by Finance Secretary Ben Jokno, said just 4 days ago at the Makati Business Club meeting that inflation has already peaked in the month of December. And this happens in January. Does the economic team really know the true state of prices? Do they really know what's happening in the economy?
I mean, to be fair, I think it's a really uncertain backdrop, not just for the Philippines, but for many countries globally. There are a lot of external factors at play, which are not in their control. So there was always that risk. But again, some of this could have been prevented by better supply management, which would have been a bit more proactive when it comes to importation policy.
But Euben,
yeah.
Why make these pronouncements that inflation has already peaked? Just don't say anything, right? Because it doesn't look good on the economic team to say that it has already peaked in December, and then you have this 14.5-year high in January.
Yeah, it's always tricky, I think, because at the same time, you want to provide some confidence in the public that, inflation is not running away and the government is doing enough. So it could be a question of, concern on credibility if
that's right.
It doesn't pan that way. So again, it has to be balanced with actual effective measures and being done in a proactive manner.
Yeah, Euben, how can you have confidence then on the economic team when they make these kinds of pronouncements? What kind of credibility do they really have? When they say it's already peaked in December, then you have this 8.7% in January.
Yeah, I agree. I think it is something of an issue, again, especially if we see numbers that are more than 8% in the next few months. From my perspective, there is recourse. There's things that can be done to improve supply. Right. I think that's really number one. And number
I
two, I think
totally
the central
understand.
bank has been
Euben,
proactive too in raising interest rates, and I think that will help eventually.
yeah, I totally understand about the supply side conditions. But I mean, if you're part of the economic team, just don't say anything if you're not quite sure about the numbers that are coming out in January. All right, let's go to the policy rate. I mean, it's currently at 5.5%, having risen a total of 3.5% in 2022. Will this mean another aggressive rate hike from the Bangko Sentral when they meet again this month?
I still think they will stick to 25 basis points. So in my own forecast, even after today's inflation print, we'll get 25 basis points next week, and then maybe another one in March. So that would take the policy rate to 6%. As you've said, BSP has been fairly aggressive in raising rates, and these take time to take effect. And so, the lags will sort of show up in the next few months. So again, I don't think they need to step up on the rate hiking cycle on the back of this number. As we've already mentioned,
Right.
This is more supply side, and it cannot be addressed completely by just monetary policy.
So Euben, if policy rates now stand at 5.5%, you're expecting another quarter of a point in this meeting, and another quarter of a point. That will be a total of 0.5%, so that will total 6%. Will this slow down the economy in the first quarter and second quarter? I mean, when it did very well in the fourth quarter at 7.6%.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm expecting. The kind of growth rates that we saw last year, probably difficult to replicate, especially when you have inflation numbers like this, and you've got last year BSP being very aggressive in raising borrowing costs. Ultimately, that will show up in lower borrowings, lower investment spending, and lower consumption expenditure. So I think net GDP growth is probably going to have to slow. And then on top of that, we've got a global growth outlook, which is also dimming, and therefore exports have to come down. So combining these together, I think growth will have to be probably lower than what we saw last year.
All right. Thank you so much for your views, Euben. So expect higher inflation still in February and March, and more interest rate hikes. Nomura Chief Asian Economist Euben Paracuelles joining us from Singapore.